everyone, and welcome. This is episode 359 of Milwaukee's Tailgate Brewers podcast, part of the MKE Tailgate Network. I'm James, joined this week by Ryan and Spencer, who is pinch hitting for Paul. He's off celebrating a birthday and some other occasions, so Paul's got the weekend off, and Spencer's in. So, Spence, what have you been up to lately?
A lot of coaching stuff going on these days. I've also done multiple podcasts already this week, so it's been a busy week, but happy to jump in and do some more. I can never talk enough Brewers baseball, but yeah, otherwise everything's been good.
Appreciate you stepping in and doing another one for us. This is great. Always good to have you. Ryan, how you been?
Good. The sports weekend took a better turn just a few minutes ago with Liverpool coming back and winning, so that's good. Very happy about that. It had been pretty miserable before that. State of Nebraska can just get bent right now from, well, as far as I'm concerned. As bad as that
Not a
football
great
game.
Saturday.
Yeah, as bad as that football game was, the volleyball game was maybe even worse because the volleyball team's actually very good, so getting worked like that was not great. So anyway, yes, very happy about Liverpool's situation and looking forward to a big week of matches from them.
Yep, and hopefully the Packers don't embarrass themselves against the 49ers again this afternoon. We'll see what happens there. I got a little too arrogant about the Bears game last week when we were doing this at the top of the show and ended up being a little scarier than I thought. So I'll just keep my mouth shut this week. But hey, the good news is there's a lot of Brewers news to talk about. So let's get right into that. But first, a reminder, as always, you can become a patron at patreon.com/NKE Tailgate. $2 a month thrown our way guarantees you get your questions answered both on this podcast and on Paul's Reporting as Eligible Packers podcast. $5 level gets you the perk plus the additional exclusive content, including that minor league extra monthly podcast with Ryan and Spencer, as well as Paul's mini pods. So I guess let's start with awards week. It was Baseball Writer Awards week. And, you know, as we mentioned last week, a couple of Brewers up for some top league honors. Jackson Chourio was a finalist for National League Rookie of the Year, although just as we kind of suspected, is a very distant third because I was kind of surprised that Paul Skeens ran away with it as much as he did. But Skeens first, Jackson Merrill second, Jackson Chourio third. But Pat Murphy did win Manager of the Year, and it was pretty much like a landslide. He got 27 out of the 30 first place votes, which, again, I guess surprised me that it was almost that unanimous. You know, as we talked about, it doesn't really mean much. I know Paul, when he was here, doesn't have the highest opinion of Pat Murphy and his, you know, tactical decision making, but it seemed like a pretty clear choice. And I think, Spencer, it is kind of funny, though, that Murph got one of these in his first try after Craig Counsell never got one with the Brewers, right?
Oh, it absolutely is. The irony tastes really good on this one. It's pretty funny. And I don't know. I mean, like, I agree with what Paul said on that episode. Like, I'm not the biggest fan of Murph as a tactical manager, but I do think what gets overlooked and honestly might be the most important part of managing is the ability to keep the clubhouse in order, to keep everybody loose, to be able to kind of run things almost as like a CEO of the coaching staff and the players and do all of that stuff. And that the in-game management is less likely to cost you games than I think people probably would guess. You can really, really screw up and then maybe lose your team a game. But in the end, most of the options you're putting in or taking out of the game are all MLB caliber players, especially on a Brewers roster. So I thought he did a good job all season. I thought it was almost certainly going to go to him just because of kind of how Manager of the Year awards usually go. It was a first-year guy. It was somebody whose team overperformed what most pundits were expecting. And yeah, it wasn't too much of a shock, but I am a little surprised, like you said, that he got almost a unanimous first place voting, because it felt like some Padres and Mets, just because of their markets, were going to end up getting more votes than they did. But yeah, they didn't, and it was good to see him get the recognition.
Yeah, this is one of those situations where it's also good that this happened before the postseason started, because had the votes been cast after the postseason, I think Martinez would have gotten a lot more consideration for it than what he ended up getting. And this should be a regular season award, because if you're taking into consideration all of the managers in the league, you have to make it about the regular season, because not all of them get the chance to add that value in the postseason. That's just, yeah. But the Manager of the Year award is silly, because all it is just, which team had the biggest difference between what was expected of them and what was what they ended up doing, and then give credit to that manager. And that's legitimately a very silly way to do this, but I don't know that there is a better way to do it. I certainly haven't come up with one. It feels like you would need to have somebody like in bed with each team for like a week or two throughout the entire season. You'd have to have somebody in there for like 10 days per team and just watch what's going on. And even that, you're not going to get the full scope of what they're doing throughout the entire season. So it's sort of a silly award. But it is, at the same time, it is satisfying that Murphy got one and Craig never did, considering what happened. So I don't know that. Oh wait, that's the question for Morgoth. Never mind. I'll shut up.
I was gonna say I am a little surprised that Carlos Mendoza with the Mets didn't get a little bit more love, just because the Mets' second half run was such a storyline nationally, and they had to dig out of such a big hole to even get to that doubleheader to qualify for the playoffs. But ironically, I think, it's because Craig Counsell left that Murphy also got some extra cred too. That played into the whole nobody expected anything with the Brewers thing. And it's kind of funny that ended up playing a role. But yes, we do have a question on Patreon from Morgoth10 about the Manager of the Year voting. And let's get to that now. Morgoth saying it's already funny enough that Murph won Manager of the Year, but vote in the American League winning is just a cherry on top. Greg beat out by not only his own former bench coach, but also a player he managed, the biggest of lulls. But anyway, if you're putting money down, do you think Greg ever takes home the award at this point? So, Ryan, you mentioned like Manager of the Year is all about overcoming expectations. And it, I guess, to me, is like very difficult to set the stage for that when you're managing for the Cubs, and you at least should have some sort of advantage baked in with payroll and big market and all that. But what do you think?
Well, I mean, he is a legitimately good manager, so that does help. Like he's good at the job, and maybe not as good as we all thought, or we ascribed value to him that maybe belonged to the entire staff, or more rightly should have been given to the entire staff and the entire organization. But I still think he's a good manager. But yeah, he's going to have to fight that expectation thing, because he doesn't, he won't have as low of expectations really when they're going to be good as some other teams might. Now, there are some different ways that this can go. They could be a surprise team at some point, and he could end up getting one that way. Or they could just end up winning, I don't know, having like a 105-win season or something down the line if they get their act together and figure out how to, actually construct a roster, Jed. But that's a little bit, it's a higher bar for him to clear to win Manager of the Year when you have the resources and the sort of baked in advantages of being in a big market like that. But it's not impossible. I mean, big market managers have won the award, but it is less likely. That said, I'm sure he doesn't care about winning Manager of the Year. He wants to win a World Series. That's like the actual goal. So yeah, we'll see.
I guess speaking of it really being a staff effort, at least, especially in Milwaukee, should mention real quick, the Brewers lost a big one in the last week. Our worst nightmares came true. Walker McKinven, the former run prevention coordinator for the Brewers, a big part of the success of the pitching and defense for the Brewers the last few years. He is going to Chicago, but not the Cubs, as we had all feared. We all thought that maybe Counsell would poach him with a big old bucket of money, but he's going to the South Side, Spencer. He's going to the White Sox, which, if any organization needed Walker McKinven, the White Sox might be it.
Yes, they desperately needed somebody like this, which good for them. Hopefully, I've got no issue with the White Sox. Obviously, I know back in the day, they were a bit of a rival for the Brewers, but I don't care about the White Sox in that way at all. I would love to see them at least turn things around a little bit, bring a little bit of excitement. I have a decent amount of friends who are White Sox fans from college and stuff. So like, I'd like for them to see a solid team at some point again here. And they needed somebody like Walker McKinven badly. They have been on the pitching side of things. They have been behind the times for a long time. Their work with catchers has not gone very well defensively. And those are the two things that Walker McKinven is known for more than anything else, is helping with framing and helping maximize pitchers' abilities and kind of what they do with their repertoire and everything else. So unfortunate for the Brewers. Jack and I talked about this a lot on our episode, but like for me, McKinven was probably the best managerial prospect on the Brewers staff. And it kind of sucks to lose that type of guy, because you never know how long Murph is going to be in this game, like at his age, just everything else that he's gone through. I know everything stresses him out a lot when he talks about, losing games or anything during the regular season. So you never know, but it would have been nice to have McKinven still on staff and potentially be able to move him into that managerial spot. But at the same time, who's to say the Brewers wouldn't just interview him off of a different staff, and he could end up being the manager for the Brewers either way. So good for him. He got a bump in pay, I would assume. He got a promotion in terms of his role. So good for him. I think really good for the White Sox, and it will be a loss for the Brewers, though. I think more than any other coach that they've lost this offseason, or even could lose outside of probably Chris Hook. McKinven will be a loss for the Brewers.
Yeah, he seemed to be the glue that sort of, operated between the pitching staff and the defense, and that's an important aspect. Hopefully they have somebody lined up who can do a lot of those things that he was responsible for. But yeah, this one does hurt. I'm glad he's in the other league. Not on the Cubs. Like, that was the number one fear, but the fact that he's out of the league completely. And yeah, he might be a guy that I certainly want to talk to when Murph does decide to hang it up, if he hasn't gotten a managerial job someplace else, which, the way things go, that could actually happen relatively quickly. So it used to be you had to put your time in to become a manager. You had to have like an extensive time period of being a coach and get some age, but that's really kind of gone out the window. So you can become a manager pretty quickly these days. As you can see, Stephen Vogt was retired for what, a year or 2 years before,
maybe that. Yeah,
before he actually became a manager. So it's just the amount of time that you have to put in to be able to get those jobs is not what it used to be. So, but it does suck to see him go. I'm not thrilled about it, but hopefully, they do a good job of, and they had to have known this was a potential thing coming. Yeah. So they probably have things planned out for it, but it still hurts.
I guess speaking of the White Sox and pitching development not being up to par, and that's why they needed Walker McKinven, the Brewers signed a former top 100 prospect with the Yankees system, Davy Garcia. He's sort of a post-hype prospect, but he found himself in the White Sox organization last year, and they promptly made him like even worse. So he's 25 now, but given that he was a former top 100 prospect on just about every service just a few years ago, not that long ago, and had the Yankees prospect hype machine behind him, I guess this feels like a little Tobias Myers-y to me, and maybe I'm just kind of wish casting that, but the backgrounds do seem kind of familiar, right down to spending time with the White Sox and getting just blown apart. So Spencer, I guess, first of all, do you agree this kind of feels Tobias Myers-y, and are you excited that they're taking a chance on somebody like this again?
Yeah, I think there's some Tobias Myers to this situation. I think Myers had really bounced around to a bunch of organizations prior to coming to the Brewers. And Garcia really was just a Yankee and a White Sox over the course of his time. But he's still young, like Myers was after all of that. Even though it felt like he'd been around for so long, he was still only in his mid-20s. I think what people probably don't always remember is that Myers was a minor leaguer in the Brewers system for an entire year before he made an impact on the Brewers. And I think that's what I would sort of expect with Garcia. I think in a lot of ways there's that type of like path is possible for him. He has work to do, and Jack and I talked about this one a lot on our podcast, and Jack wrote a really good article about it on Brewer Fanatic, and if you check that out, it'll break down kind of everything that's gone wrong and all the different ways that he's been messed with over the last couple of years, where I think the main thing here is the Brewers are probably going to give him a clear-cut direction, and I think that's what he needs more than anything else, is they're going to say, here are your best pitches, here's what we want, how we want you to use them, here's kind of the usage we want them to be at, and then let him go out and pitch. And he hasn't really had the opportunity to do that the last couple of years. And then going to the White Sox just made everything much worse. I think the Yankees were somewhat on the right path. And then the White Sox said, well, we're going to screw that up. So here you go. Go throw your worst pitches more and your best pitches less. And we'll go from there. They were a mess. Like I said, they really need Walker McKinnon. But there are similarities here, and there's a lot of ceiling, and I loved it. Like, for a minor league signing, this is about as exciting as it can get for me. Like, there's true untapped potential, and normally these guys are signing like in their late 20s as minor league free agents. Normally they're signing as, okay, their stuff is like kind of regressed, and there's nothing here like to really dream on. But with Garcia, there's a legit ceiling here still that can be dreamt upon, and you don't normally get that chance. This is a guy who I think could still be a major league starter in a legitimate, like, mid to back of the rotation spot, or he could be someone who breaks out into like a high leverage reliever if things don't go well as a starter. So there's a lot to like here, and I really, really like this signing, especially for a minor league deal.
Yeah, 100%. I sent out. Are we doing? What is the term for sending something on Blue Sky, like tweet? Has that been decided yet?
Skeets.
Is it Skeets? Is that what we're going with? Okay. All right. Yeah. So I did say
it's not my choice. It's not my choice. It's what the audience determined. And that's how a social media site should work. Yeah.
Anyway, I skeeted out, I guess, that Davy Garcia is the platonic ideal of a reclamation project, because he checks all the boxes. Former top prospect, relatively young still. The stuff all seems to be intact. He actually was solid in some ways, even when he was bad. He was missing bats. Mm-hmm. So and the last organization he was in was absolutely lousy. So all of those things tend to make you think that there is significant upside here for getting somebody like Garcia. And it really is. I'm having a hard time. I have to back myself off and be like, no, don't just think he's going to become a star right away, because he's now with a competent organization that knows what to do with him. Because, obviously the Yankees were good and they had him for quite a while and they weren't able to do it. So that should throw a little cold water on the he is the ace to be sort of thought process that I found myself in. But it is still very exciting, and this is what you want to do. And it is very, very telling. Like, the Brewers were able to get him, I'm sure, in large part because his agent, somebody associated with him, was like, hey, you want to go to the Brewers because they know what they're doing. If anybody can help you become a good player, the Brewers can do that. So, yep, this is an exciting one. Timeline wise, who knows? It could be that it takes a significant amount of time, like Spencer was talking about, the idea that it could be more of a 2026 thing than a 2025 thing. Sure. But then again, sometimes things click quicker, and they'll have a whole spring training to work with him, and it could go relatively quickly too if they're able to unlock what the White Sox and Yankees were not able to do. So very exciting. This is exactly the sort of thing that they need to do to keep up.
We do have a Patreon question about the Davy Garcia signing. Adam Post asking, how do you predict this season will go for Davy Garcia? It feels like it wasn't all that long ago. He was a top prospect that many wanted the Brewers to trade for. So, Ryan, Spencer, you both said, basically, I don't know if we should expect much this year. So I guess, Spencer, if it were up to you, do you just kind of stash him in AAA for this year and just have him work on some of the things and see maybe he's an option later in the year, or how would you handle this?
Yeah, I think, and Jack talked about this, and I really agree with kind of the plan he laid out. I think I would probably take him out of Major League camp pretty early on in spring, because it's hard to get innings on Major League mounds during spring, but you can start to stretch him out if you kind of option him down to the minor league side of camp and start to stretch him out. I want him to start this year. I know he's been relieving the last couple of years, but I do want him to start. I think there's more time for development when you get more innings and you get more opportunities to kind of work through issues that you might have early in a game. If you go out there for one inning at a time and you have a bad outing, you don't get any time to try and fix that issue on the mound in that game. And then you just have to go out and pitch again in 3 days or whatever and do the same thing. And I think they're going to give him a very clear-cut plan on what they want him throwing, and they're going to make him a starter. And as you go into the season, I think early on there might be struggles. I don't think there should be any surprise if there is struggles early on, but I think it'll just be all about process. If he's eventually doing well, I think my guess would be, if I'm predicting the season, is that there will be a slow start and then things will start to click as the season moves along. And then maybe by midseason, you're starting to get the thought of like, oh, okay, maybe would be ready to help if the Brewers need help this year. But I think it'll just be a bit of a slow process where he just has to get used to what the Brewers want from him. He gets time to work through any issues he has or any, slow start that he might go through. But I guess that's how I would predict it. Just a slow start, and then maybe things start picking up as the season progresses. And then you never know. Like I said, 2026 is when I think he'd have the best chance to really impact the team. But I don't think it would be out of the question if by mid-season he's helping the Major League roster either. I don't think that would be a huge shock.
Yeah, I think the priority is for him to start. I think you need to give that at least a solid half season in the minors of him working on it if he in fact needs that. But then once you've made that the priority, you let him let his progress and let what he's doing. If he is ready to start at the big league level, yeah, go ahead and do that. I'm sure there will be room. They can accommodate that and make that work. So yeah, you just let him determine it at that point. But yes, I think the priority needs to be on starting, and you don't even think about moving him to the bullpen until, like post All-Star break would be when if the starting thing isn't working and you think it can't work long-term, if you've decided it's not going to work long-term, then you could start looking at that maybe in the second half. But even then, I would like to see them give him as much of a chance to iron things out and become a plus starter, because I think he can do it. So give him that chance.
This past week, we also had the non-tender deadline. It wasn't super eventful for the Brewers, despite having a bunch of names that we went through a few weeks ago. They did non-tender Hobie Milner, but they also agreed to a deal with Eric Haas on a 1-year, $1.35 million deal. More is possible for him through incentives. MLB trade rumors had him projected at about $1.8 million in arbitration, so about a $500,000 savings for the Brewers. He's presumably going to be the backup catcher next year, but also, I think, Ryan, this feels like their standard sign this or your non-tendered contract, right? Especially given the timing there.
Yeah, it might have been that they were doing that, but there's also just if his market is better than that, he could have hit the open market and signed as a free agent if they did non-tender him. So I don't know. It's kind of standard sort of stuff here. They probably did say, yeah, like we need to do this or it's going to be a non-tender. But if he didn't think he could get more than that on the open market, then yeah, that's what it'll be. So yeah, I think that he is presumably the primary backup catcher next year, and that seems like a fine situation for him. That feels very, very good. I would have been just fine with it last year, the way it ended up working, but was happy that they went and added Gary Sanchez in front of him to give their a even more powerful bat, another potential like DH/catcher bat sort of in front of him. And so Haas ended up getting pushed a little bit further down the depth chart, but I am perfectly happy with this. This works.
We do have a Patreon question from Price Trozen on this one, who's asking, Haas got picked up for 2025, and I, for one, am pretty stoked. But as Caro continues to rehab, do you think the Brewers look for another option at backup catcher, or are they really pretty well set up with William Contreras and Haas barring injuries? So, Spencer, obviously, heading into spring, you need a lot of catchers on hand. Jefferson Caro is continuing to rehab shoulder injury for catcher. I have expressed my concerns about that before. So do you think they need to go out and look for maybe another, minor league signing with an invite to camp, that kind of thing for catcher?
Yeah, and I would expect them to add at least one. I mean, even at AAA, you're going to want to have probably 3 catchers most of the time. So I would expect them to go out and sign somebody to non-roster invite, minor league deal with a non-roster invite to big league camp seems like a pretty safe assumption. There's guys like old friend Luke Mailey is going to be out there again. Guys like that are pretty readily available. And the Brewers tend to give those guys opportunities too. So it's not like this is a place where you would come in and not get anything out of it. And like we mentioned, Caro's going to be in AAA, but I don't know if he'll be able to catch every day. We don't know what's going on for sure with that. So there's going to be plenty of playing time behind the plate in AAA. And then, like Price mentioned, like he said, barring injury, but the Brewers have been extremely lucky in terms of catcher health the last few years. Odds are most of the time somebody's going to end up getting hurt at that position for at least a little while. And that means the third catcher who's going to be in AAA is almost always somebody that you'll end up seeing. So a lot of these guys like that opportunity. Obviously it could be Caro depending how everything goes and what the timing is of that. But I would expect somebody to be brought in, and I would expect multiple, maybe a lower minor league slot or something, but they want a lot of catchers in camp, like Ryan said, because there's a lot of pitchers throwing and they want to have the people available to them. And I guess just on the same note, coming to the Brewers does end up usually pushing you further along as a catcher just because of the ability to improve as a receiver. Even Eric Haas took a really big step in that regard last year. So,
yeah, absolutely. I think that this situation calls out for a non-roster invitee or 2 or 3 or whatever, but probably not a guy that you're going to have to put on the 40-man right away. That seems to make the most sense of the situation. I wonder about Mejia, if he could be a possibility coming back to because he spent a good chunk, really most of last year, in AAA with the Brewers. If that's the kind of guy that you would potentially bring back again, he may be looking for someplace with a little bit more of a path back to the big leagues, because I think I'm sure sees himself as a big leaguer. But yeah, it will depend on what the opportunities and things out there are for somebody like that. But yes, they will definitely be adding non-roster invitees at not just catcher, but at other positions as well throughout the winter. So, yeah, this is what that situation calls out for.
Do we need to talk about Hobie, or can we just move on? Because I'm just glad to be done with Hobie and him taking up a roster spot. I'm sure he's a nice person. He was a fun, quirky lefty for a minute there, but he just got so overused that I got sick of him. So that's my feeling.
I mean, he was really pretty good for the Brewers over the course of, what was it, 3 seasons now? I gotta go look and make sure that
it feels like forever.
4 seasons, actually. Yeah.
Which is forever for a reliever in one spot. Yeah.
It is forever for a reliever in one spot, though. Honestly, his great season was 2023, where he had a 1.82 ERA. Other than that, he had a 3.76 in 2022. He only had 20 innings in 2021, but 2024, the ERA was pushing up close to 5. Yeah, I was not unhappy that they non-tendered him. I understand that he is a fan favorite in a lot of ways, and people are going to miss him, but I think it was time to move on and do something different. Yeah. I get what they like about him. I'm looking at my thing, the strikeout to walk ratio for pitchers. He was solidly above 4 every year with the Brewers. He just didn't walk that many people and missed more bats than you would think for a guy with his stuff. That was always the thing. You couldn't figure out how he was doing it, but the strikeout rates were relatively solid. But yeah, I think I'm ready to be moved on from the Hobie Milner experience at this point. I'm ready.
He had reverse platoon splits as a left-handed reliever this past year. So it was time to move on.
So weird.
756 OPS against lefties, 644 against righties. Again, what are you here for? Anyway, they've got the roster spot now. So that might come in handy because in other roster news, as expected, the Brewers protected Logan Henderson from the Rule 5 draft, but they also protected Chad Patrick, which may or may not be a surprise. We'll talk about that in a second. You know, as we talked about a little bit last week with Ryan, Henderson was definitely expected. Patrick, less so, but as we talked about, he was he the AAA or minor league pitcher of the year for the last year? Like he was good.
Yeah.
AAA's minor league pitcher of the year. So not terribly surprising, but I guess somebody that was left off was Shane Smith, and Baseball America apparently thinks that he could get snatched up somewhere. So Spencer, let's talk with you. I know you and Ryan did like a deep dive into the Rule 5 guys on the minor league extra. We heard Ryan's take last week. Any surprises here? Any disappointment they didn't protect Shane Smith, or is this about what you expected?
I kind of expected him to be left off, but I do think there's a chance that he's going to end up getting picked in this draft. I just think he kind of fits the bill of what a lot of teams look for in the Rule 5 draft. It's just, it's a reliever who the Brewers had starting most of the year, but it's a guy who could step into the MLB bullpen and probably hold his own. And then that gives the team the opportunity to potentially keep him for a year and then figure out what they want to do with him long term. And I think those are the types of arms that teams like to take a chance on. But it's 2 good breaking balls. It's a fastball that's got decent shape to it and good mid-90s velo to it. So I think what it came down to for the Brewers is that they have a lot of guys that kind of fit the same mold as Shane Smith. And for them, that makes him, they'd like to keep him, I'm sure, but it makes him a little bit more of a, if we lose him, okay, that's unfortunate, but we'll survive type of thing. And I think with Patrick, the ability to kind of be ready to start in the major leagues gives him a nice, solid floor that the Brewers could potentially use here. And I think in the end, they probably figured with the results he had at AAA last year in a very hitter-friendly environment, he was more likely to get picked than some of the other guys, and it allows them to keep the depth without risking, potentially losing someone like that who they think could at least help at the major league level. So not super surprised by any of this. I think heading into the Arizona Fall League, I definitely would have put Coleman Crowe over Patrick, but I think by the end of it, it was more of a toss-up with Crowe just not looking like he's necessarily ready yet coming off Tommy John, and the fact that a team has to have him ready if they're going to pick him because he has to be in a big league. So, yeah.
Yeah, not particularly shocking in any way here, except that it is a little bit interesting that they chose to go with a guy who really potentially has less upside in Chad Patrick than a guy like Shane Smith, who you could see really, because of the quality of the stuff, transforming into a really good relief pitcher. I don't think anybody thinks that Chad Patrick is going to be more than roster filler. So I guess you do kind of wonder then what their thought process is. If they're protecting Patrick, what that says about their plans for adding to the rotation this winter, that maybe that's going to be less of a focus than maybe we would think it would be. I don't know, that maybe it's probably reading way too much into the situation, but if they're keeping Patrick, then they're doing so because they think he's rotation depth for this year, right? That's what that thought process has to be.
Yeah.
So then, yeah, if that's a thing that they're looking at him as rotation depth, then that is interesting. At least it's worth noting.
All right, let's move on to other Patreon questions this week. And the first couple deal with one of the more interesting free agents this winter, Roki Sasaki, the next big name Japanese pitcher coming over to the majors. But this is a little bit different. This isn't like the Ohtani sweepstakes or others. He's actually entering MLB as an international free agent. So that means he won't sign until after January 15th. And teams signing him have to work that into their international free agent bonus pools, which conveniently for the Brewers maybe gives them more of a shot than they used to or would have otherwise. I don't think it's terribly likely, but we do have a couple of questions here. First from Luke Roy's Suitcase asking, now that he'll be in the 2025 signing window, how do the Brewers project in the Sasaki sweepstakes? Could they be a possible contender for him? How would they go about accruing more international money? And then Cyber Cleric asking, with a rumor of a source close to Sasaki saying a small market team with a solid development setup and plan could be the best destination for him, what chances do you give the Brewers going after Roki in terms of pool money? Don't the Brewers have some of the most in the next signing window? So kind of interesting here, Ryan. I guess, what are your takes on this? I still think, somebody like Seattle might be more likely for Roki Sasaki, just given history and West Coast proximity. But how do you see this playing out? And do the Brewers have a chance to at least, make a bid here?
I mean, it's an extreme long shot. I don't know if they're even preparing to make a bid, if they're putting together a presentation, how much effort and push they're even going to put in behind this, or if they just assume he's going to end up, like you said, on the West Coast. Everybody is kind of saying Dodgers because, of course, everybody's saying Dodgers. But yeah, if he decides to go to a smaller market team that has a history of pitching development, well, yeah, Seattle's right there, and they've been very good lately in terms of pitching development. So that would also make perfect sense for him. I think it's an extreme long shot either way that he ends up with the Brewers, but I mean, you can't completely eliminate the possibility, but just so we don't get anybody angry, Ohtani, when he signed this last winter, obviously was like a regular major league free agent, but when he signed with the Angels back in, 2017, he was in the same situation that Sasaki was in, which was he had to sign for the international bonus pool. Out of that was what he did. And that's part of why he ended up with the Angels, was they were the ones who had the international bonus pool and said, hey, we'll do what you want. We will accommodate your wishes to be a two-way player at a time when a lot of teams were doubting that he could do that. And like the National League wasn't even an option because it didn't have the DH. So yeah, it's interesting, but I definitely nobody should be expecting Roki Sasaki to be a Brewer. It would be it would really be a shock. I mean, it would be a huge shock if that happened. Nationally, it would be a jaw-dropping sort of situation if that were to actually happen.
Milwaukee's fun in the summer, and you can tell them on that. It's fine. I think the bonus pool situation is kind of interesting to me because I'm pulling up a Baseball America article from last spring about what the bonus pools will be this coming January. And the Brewers are in that top tier of about 7.55 million, just by virtue of having a competitive balance pick too. So they have more available too. But I guess, Spencer, for those of us who don't know, how much of that might be like spoken for already in other arrangements and other signings? You kind of have to factor that in too.
Probably 7.55 million or whatever the number was.
Sure.
It is most likely already accounted for. Now, the thing is, if Roki Sasaki came to the Brewers and said, if you give me the full pool, I will sign with you, they would most likely back out. And I'm only saying almost certainly they would back out of all of their other agreements and sign Roki Sasaki. Like, it would be a tough look, and they might, sever some relationships down in Latin America and all these other countries. But like, at the same time, this is a basically guaranteed major league starter, whereas you're getting a bunch of lottery tickets when you sign people who are 16, 17 years old. And it would suck because obviously the Brewers are having quite a bit of success in that realm right now with guys like Cherio and Jesus Mate and a bunch of international signings that are looking pretty good. But it's still, you're taking the sure thing if given the opportunity over all of these players you like, but you really don't know what's going to happen once they get into pro ball for real. So, I agree with Ryan. I doubt that it's going to happen, but if you take all of the, just at face value, it's the Brewers have the most pool money, tied for the most pool money to offer. They're a small market team, which I don't think that's really a selling point, but I think it's more like they're okay going to a small market if
Sure.
that ends up being the case. But they do have great pitching development, and you never can say never, I guess, in this scenario, but I would be pretty shocked. And I think, like Ryan said, the whole baseball world would be as well.
Yeah, it is interesting that Manfred said, right, that this was going to push into the 2025 bonus pool at this point.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because the Dodgers and Orioles seem to have both saved like 2.5-ish million from their bonus pools from last year to be able to potentially accommodate this. And so they're left with basically nothing to show for their 2.5 million for this time period. So that part of it is kind of interesting. It's eyebrow raising, but the fact that now every team is sort of in play after the January 15th window reopens, the fact that every team is in play should ultimately lead to him getting more money than he could get by trying to, pick over the scraps of whatever. But ultimately, I mean, if I gave you the Dodgers versus the field, who are you taking?
Ooh. I think I'd take the Dodgers.
Yeah,
I think I'd take the field. I don't know. The Giants are with the Dodgers in the lowest pool amount left for 25. But you've got the Angels-ish. You've got the Mariners. I don't think he'd go to the Sacramento A's. You're not coming to America to play in Sacramento.
I do think the Mariners make sense because they fit the pitching development thing too. Like that makes plenty of sense. But I would still say of the other ones listed, they don't necessarily fit the pitching development part of the equation. Sure. So I would guess, and the Dodgers do absolutely fit that. So I would still, I guess, probably take the Dodgers, but I do think the Mariners are probably the team I would look at next behind the Dodgers. And I don't think people have talked about that enough.
And the Mariners are in that same boat with the Brewers in the highest cap here. You can also trade for more bonus pool money, right? To go back to Luke Roy's question here, like the Dodgers could sell off a couple of prospects for chunks of change here or there. So that there are ways around that. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I would say also the Padres, though they don't have a stellar pitching development reputation. They really don't. But they also have Yu Darvish. And apparently that's been mentioned on multiple podcasts that I've listened to about this, that Yu Darvish is like the dean of Japanese veteran pitchers at this point and is widely respected. As particularly, I guess Sasaki really respects him. So maybe the idea of coming to work with Yu Darvish and like, if it's not the whole organization, at least Yu Darvish is there. I could see the Padres, the West Coast thing. I could see that too. But Dodgers versus the field. I'll take the Dodgers.
Sure. All right. Brian Polakowski is asking, which offseason milestone are you most interested in? The non-tender deadline, draft lottery, winter meetings, Rule 5 draft, arm filing, international signing period, pitchers and catchers reporting. So, this is the time of year where like geeks like ourselves who are playing OOTP in our free time are this is where you lay the foundation for the next year, right? So this is kind of exciting, and you can find the under the radar guys. But Spencer, I guess out of that group of things that Brian mentioned, what's your favorite?
My favorite is the international signing period because it's really the only guaranteed time to have a bunch of exciting stuff happening. Like the rest of it is all based off of kind of hope, especially these days. The winter meetings just have not been that exciting lately. They used to be something where I was like glued to my TV on MLB Network whenever I could be because there were signings and trades breaking pretty consistently. And now it's just, we heard that they're talking and teams are talking, and it's still going to be another month before anything happens half the time. And, but the signing period is a guaranteed, there's about to be probably for the Brewers, 30 plus players signed that I get to try and dig into as much as I can. And so that's the most exciting to me, but I will always have the winter meetings kind of in the back of my head. Like, I love the winter meetings just because of like the nostalgia of them actually being exciting in the past. They just aren't that way anymore.
Yeah, it could swing back the other direction. I don't know if it will this year. This is going to be a weird market as far as free agents go. So I don't know if we're going to see a big flux of of
Yeah.
free agent signings, but we might see some trades and things like that with
Mhm.
everybody together. We'll see. We'll see. I'm not ready to give up on the winter meetings as an exciting thing. And I'm very happy. I haven't had MLB Network for like the last 2 or 3 winter meetings, and I have it back now. So I'm excited to have that again, because yes, that is exactly what you just put it on in the background and it's just on that week, other than, I don't know, Badgers basketball or something that might also otherwise be going on. But yeah, it's basically just on in the background during that time, and it's fun. So hopefully we get, fingers crossed, that we get some excitement, not just for the Brewers, which obviously we always hope to see exciting things, but for the game as a whole during the winter meetings. That would be great.
Next up, we have Jay Google this week. We talked earlier about the Brewers non-tender period being kind of uneventful, but not the case for some other teams. So Jay's asking, who are some players that were non-tender that the Brewers should look at? Patrick Sandoval, Brendan Rodgers, Phil Quantrill, just to name some names. Also, should the Brewers make another attempt to sign Jose Quintana so we never have to face him again? Spencer, I guess, looking at the list of non-tenders, anybody jump out to you as maybe interesting buy low candidates?
Quantrill was the guy that I really liked at the deadline as a potential Brewers pickup. So I would enjoy, I would imagine, not a terribly high contract, a 1-year deal or something of that sort for him this next year. That would be, I think, a decent way to kind of fill out the rotation where there's maybe some question marks towards the bottom end of it. I looked at some of the other names, just like, honestly, a lot of them aren't super exciting. I'm not. Sandoval's going to miss most of next season. He had Tommy John mid-season, so he would be a nice candidate, I think, but he probably wouldn't have been non-tendered if he was healthy. So some other names I liked were actually Wilmer Flores, but not the position player one, the pitcher one, who was at one time a pretty big prospect. But I saw these names as like minor league deals, like kind of like the Garcia route, where there's untapped potential with some of these guys. So he's only 23. I think he'll be 24 by the time the season starts, but he's got good stuff. Former pretty decent prospect Dylan Tate, who had a pretty good run in the Orioles bullpen at one point. Seems like somebody who, again, would be like a nice minor league with a invitation to spring training type of deal. He didn't have a great year with the Blue Jays, and then the Cubs actually non-tendered Trey Gentner. I don't know how you pronounce it, but he's a 6'7" dude with big extension, pretty big fastball, and some decent off speed. His best pitch is a splitter, and the Brewers seem to have something against splitters. Which honestly I probably should have mentioned with Sasaki. They don't love splitters usually. A lot of their guys don't throw them. They kind of took Montas off of the splitter when he got here. He threw it still, but not a ton. But I really like his stuff, so he'd be another like interesting minor league deal with an invitation. But yeah, in terms of guys that I would want stepping into a major league roster spot that got non-tendered, not many. I could live with Brendan Rodgers if they got him for cheap. I think he's at least somewhat interesting, but not many out there for me.
Yeah, and I'll take the other part of this. I echo all of that Spencer said. He would know a lot better than I would. You keep a closer watch on that segment of the population than I do. The Quintana thing, yeah, he seems like he would be a good fit. It's just a question of at the right contract price. But yeah, they're looking for rotation depth, obviously, and so at the right price, I would be perfectly happy to do the Jose Quintana thing. It should happen eventually that he ends up here, right? Like the story won't be complete without him ending up on the Brewers at some point. So yeah, let's go ahead and get that taken care of.
Man, what happened to Brendan Rodgers? Like, I remember him being, hotshot prospect, but just never has like seemed to hit. He's got like a career 86 WRC plus playing in Colorado.
Yeah, that's your answer, James. What happened to Brendan Rodgers? Yes. The Rockies happened to Brendan Rodgers. Like that's.
Oh yeah. I should also say it's Cal Quantrill. Paul was his dad. I don't know where I got Phil from. Anyway, maybe a fake name in the OTP or something. I don't know. Michael Parr asking, does it bother anyone that Jackson Churiel will probably never play center field for the Brewers? He seemed like such a good prospect there, but with Perkins, Mitchell, and Frelick, he seems stuck in the corners. I guess, Ryan, it's never too bad to have too many center fielders. You can build the entire offense or defense out of center fielders, and you get good results like that. But I guess, are you itching to see Chourio play center at any point, or no?
I mean, I wouldn't rule it out as a possibility down the road, but we saw last year he still had work to do on developing as a defender. He was very raw defensively in the outfield, and he did seem to make legitimate improvements throughout the year. So he's 21 years old. I wouldn't eliminate it as a possibility, but you have to remember, he just started play. He was an infielder until basically he came to the States, right? Spencer, when he was in the DSL, was he still playing in the infield in the DSL, or had he already moved to the outfield at that point? I forget.
He was like splitting time during that DSL season. He did spend some in the infield and then probably more time in the outfield, but yeah, he didn't focus on it solely until he got into the States.
Yeah. So I think I wouldn't say he probably will never play center field. And obviously he got into center field a little bit last year when he was covering and there were switching going around. Like he stood, right? He was in at least for like an inning in this inner center field at some point last year. So I think we will probably see that at some point. But fact of the matter is they just have so many good defenders ahead of him that are more polished defensively in the outfield that there's no need to do it. So why do it when there's just no need? So it's fine. It's not that big a deal.
Yeah, I don't think it, honestly, to me, it just doesn't matter. I think you have, you get out there, you want the bat to play as well as it can possibly play. You want him to be a good defender wherever he is, and you want really good defense in center field. And if that's somebody else, it just doesn't matter to me. I think it's more about putting the best outfield out there that you can. And Chourio's not going to lose value by playing a corner because the bat is always going to be the carrying tool here. I mean, to the Brewers, I should say. I think in terms of like WAR, he probably would a little bit, but to the Brewers, they're always going to have an elite center fielder. And if they don't, then that's when he ends up out there. But like they're always trying to carry an elite defensive center fielder. And if he's not the one out there, I just don't think it really matters in terms of what the Brewers get out of it. Like I said, it might affect his value league wide technically, but the Brewers don't seem to care about that. They want to do what gives them the best chance to win.
Yeah, I could see a scenario where, he ends up being in center field because the Brewers have, a bigger bat that they could play in left or something that's not elite defensively, something like that. But I think you're always going to pick the better defender for center.
Yeah, and I did look it up, and apparently he didn't play a single inning in center field last year. He was exclusively in the corners. So I take that back. Apparently he was even subbed over there at some point, and they never shifted him into center at any point. So that does take me a little bit by surprise, but yeah, not a big deal.
Interesting. All right. Another one from Jay Google looking ahead to the draft now. So Jay says, looking towards 2025, the Brewers are set up pretty good to make another haul on prospects, right? So they've gonna have about the 20th-ish pick, as he said, and they'll also get a comp pick around 32nd or so for Willy Adames after he declined the qualifying offer. They'll also have the competitive balance round A pick at around 37. Second round pick around 59th, and then the 68th pick. So that's 5 picks in the top 70 again, roughly $12 million to spend on them. Ryan, that's looking like another big draft haul potentially.
Yeah, hopefully the draft class is better this year and deeper this year than it was last year, and you get something that's more akin to the 2023 class than the 2024 class. But I think people are too quickly writing off the 2024 class as a disappointment. Obviously, they didn't get Livonis, who was, a big part of that and was their swing for the fences. They didn't land that, but they're going to have a lot of picks and a lot of money to be able to spend in 2025 on this. So that should work well for them and be a positive. And we know this is a core part of their philosophy and what they do. They will maximize it and do everything they can to get the most out of it. We'll just have to see how it plays out. Hopefully more like 2023 again.
Yeah, this is expected to be a better draft in 2024. So hopefully, like Ryan said, that will play into the Brewers' hands a little bit. I think going back to the Lavonis pick and the fact that they got an extra pick because of that in this upcoming class, I think that was the logic the whole time, was that we're shooting for the stars here on Lavonis, and we know he's probably going to be pretty hard to sign, but at the same time, we don't love this class, and if we don't sign him, we'll get this pick in the next class where it's expected to be a better overall group of talent. So I think this is kind of what the plan was at the time, and now we're kind of seeing how it can play out, where you almost certainly will end up with 5 picks in the top 70 and a ton of bonus pool money, which is even more important than the number of picks, because it just gives you the opportunity to spread all this money around, use it how you want, and take some big shots, or say we're going after a bunch of high school guys that we like, and we're going to kind of spread it out and see what we can get out of it. But yeah, it's a really good spot to be in heading into this draft.
Yeah.
All right, last question this week, another one from Morgoth 10, and I don't know where this comes from, so I just saved it as the weird one to end on. So Morgoth 10 asking, which Brewer would be the least embarrassing to accidentally puke on while riding a roller coaster? So I guess least embarrassing, it implies it's somebody you're not terribly upset you threw up on. So I don't know. Spencer, anyone come to mind?
I don't know why, but the moment I read this question, Bryce Wilson jumped into my head, and I know he's not even a Brewer anymore, but like, I just feel like Bryce Wilson would have just like brushed it off. And also I wouldn't have, like you kind of hinted at, puking on Bryce Wilson just wouldn't have felt that bad for me. I'd have been fine. It's all right, Bryce. But I guess of actual current Brewers, I'm thinking maybe more along the lines of like someone who'd be really understanding that it happened. And that to me just screams Brandon Woodruff, that he would just be like, no, it's okay. It's okay. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Woody would just be like, you're fine. Don't worry about it.
Laid back Southern guy. No worries.
Yep. So those would be my 2, current and a guy who was just on the team.
Yeah. So I'm gonna call my shot here on this and say that actually the answer is a guy who's going to be coming back to the Brewers, because why wouldn't he come back to the Brewers this winter? Maybe as an NRI, or I don't know. But Adrian Hauser.
Yeah, I was gonna say Hauser. If anybody knows puking.
Yeah, I was going to say, he can't get mad at you because, he had his moments in the sun as far as puking goes. So, like, he just has to kind of roll with it and be like, yeah. Like, he could be like, well, at least I didn't do it on anybody. But, yeah, that I'm going to go with Adrian Hauser.
Did either of you happen to see, I think it was a Pitching Ninja gif of the guy, I think it was a college kid who was like projectile vomiting while delivering a pitch. And I was like, oh man, I thought we outlawed spitballs, but I don't know about puke balls.
Yeah, that was really, really wild, because there was a lot of liquid. He clearly overhydrated.
It was just water.
Yeah, it really did look like it was mostly just water. Like that was he had clearly gotten too much water in his stomach, and but the way that it just came out while he was like in his motion was something. Yeah, I was not expecting to see that.
That is a max effort delivery if I've ever seen one. Yes. All right, that'll do it for questions this week. Thanks everybody for sending those in. A reminder, patreon.com/MKE tailgate. $2 a month is all it takes to get your questions answered here. Or if you have Packers questions for Paul on reporting as eligible, same deal applies there. $5 a month, you get the exclusive additional podcast, the Minor League Extra, with Spencer and Ryan as well. So that'll do it for this week. Thank you everybody for tuning in. We are going to take the next weekend off because it'll be Thanksgiving, spend some time with families, travel, all that good stuff. But we will be back the week after that to recap anything that happens. And, now that I'm saying this, it's about time for the Brewers to make their somewhat annual big blockbuster trade around Thanksgiving. So if something big happens, maybe we'll do an emergency pod or something. But as of now, we're planning to take the next weekend off. So I hope you all enjoy the short week. Go spend time with your friends, family, whoever you want to be by for Thanksgiving. And we'll see you here next time on Milwaukee's Tailgate. Have a good one.